Let's be consistent.
Welcome back to another episode of The Key to Consistency. I am your host, Rakia Collins, and on today's episode, we are going to be discussing the relationship between consistency and entrepreneurship. This is a very exciting topic. I am so excited to be talking to you guys today about the relationship between probably two of my most favorite topics. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to dive right in. The first thing that we're going to be discussing together is going to be what role does business planning play when we think about consistency in entrepreneurship? And for those of you guys who are like, a business plan, what? That's so like 1990s, early 2000s. Nobody writes down business plans. Nobody goes into that level of detail anymore. Depending on, who you are, I'm not going to say and continue to like generalize that business plans are mandatory. They are a must have because you can certainly scour the internet and you can find your fair share of success stories where, people don't necessarily have a full-blown business plan, right? Especially if you are someone who may be like bootstrapping your own idea. You may not necessarily have a fully fleshed out business plan. So I would encourage you, though, even if you don't want to write down a business plan, to continue to think deeply about your business and the plan and the vision that you have for your business. I think that a lot of times as an entrepreneur, people begin to underestimate, the level of planning that it takes to be a successful entrepreneur. And listen, guys, my hand is raised as well. I am not out here passing out judgment. I, can't necessarily say that for some of the businesses that I've started in the past, I did not have a business plan. And that's likely why most of them, if not all of them, I'm not going to lie, I'm going to be honest, all of them failed because I did not have a business plan, and not, again, that traditional business plan, but I didn't even have a vision. I just knew that this was an interesting topic and this was something that I wanted to do. Right. So to give you an example, one of the businesses I started was a mobile application. The mobile application was called Crown. And the purpose of this app was to allow, people who were up and coming in the music industry to essentially be discovered by people by like posting, 10 to 15-second snippets on the mobile application, and people would like it. Why I spent $10,000 just to get that mobile application developed, just for it to flop, is still beyond me. And I want to continue to kind of unpack that story because it really likely might not have been the idea itself. It might have been my lack of vision. Number one, if you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, then you know I do not have a music background at all. I know nothing about the music industry. I don't even know if something like that would have even taken off, if there was even a need for that, right? And so when we think about business planning, I don't want you guys to think about the traditional, oh, I have to, write down this thick 20-page document of my business. It can be as simple as, what does my target audience even need, right? And going back to my story, do I even have a consistent background in the thing that I am trying to bring to the world? In my story, you can tell that since I don't have a background in music, it was easy for me when, it came down to the sales and it came down to marketing. It was easy for me just to throw in the towel because I didn't know anything about the industry. I didn't care to know anything about the industry. I was purely in that business for money. And how is it going to make money, you say? Glad you asked. I was shooting for a free mobile application that essentially would make money from ads as you were viewing the music videos or just like the little snippets. In between them would be ads, and that was going to be the way I was going to initially make money on that mobile application. And so, as mentioned earlier, that was a flop on my end. And again, I don't think it was because of the business, but I had no background in music. There was not a consistency in the background. And why is that so important? When you understand the ins and outs of something, you can begin to, you have a tighter pulse on it, and you can easily find a niche that solves an actual problem versus making up a problem in your head and trying to solve it. And clearly, that is an example, a pretty expensive example, because I can imagine what I could have done with that $10,000 had I, invested it in a multitude of different investment vehicles. But I give you guys that example just for you to know that even if you don't have a, fully fleshed out business plan, at least have some type of consistent background in the thing that you are trying to go after. I'd also say, outside of having a business plan, make sure you think about, steps 2, 3, and 4, right? Not just the initial step. Going back to my example of my mobile application, I only thought about, creating it. I did not think about, okay, once the mobile application is created, once you've worked with the developers and they have it on the App Store, what's going to happen after that? I had no sales plan. I had no way to think about marketing or social media or anything like that. And just for reference, I realized I didn't tell you guys when this happened. I was like, 2021? And so this was almost like 6, 7 years ago when I did this. And so it was definitely eye-opening for me, and really allowed me to understand that it's not just about that initial step. It's about thinking 2, 3, 4, maybe even 10 steps in advance. Even if you don't want to fully flesh everything out, I would say at least sit down and think about the different phases of implementation to, get you from where I am to where I want to go. And work your way backwards, right? Sometimes as humans, we can be so focused on that end result of, well, I just want money, right? Well, okay, fine. If that's where your mind is, work your way back from, money. What does the customer journey look like? How will they even get to the point of giving you their money, right? And so even if you work your way backwards that way, you can look at it forwards and backwards, but hopefully you'll be able to, as you're going through that customer journey, realize areas that you need to take time to think through and think them through thoroughly. One of the things, I can say that I did not think through was, of course, market trends as it relates to, mobile applications around music. I can clearly tell you I did not have a consistent decision-making process, meaning if I were to make a decision in the business, I would think 2, 3, 4 times about that same decision and then end up changing my mind because I thought about it so much, right? To where I begin to overthink about the decision that I made. And to be honest, while this is a different podcast, I realized that that became something that I did not just in business, but in my personal life as well, because I didn't trust the decisions that I made when I instantly made them. I was always looking for, well, what if this or what if that or what if this or what if that? And so when you are being, or thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, just, thinking about being consistent in the business plan, whatever your vision is for your business, making sure that you're making consistent decisions, looking at what is the market saying, right? Being very consistent and deliberate with the things that you're doing. And hopefully you'll learn from my mistake, right? You'll learn from, planning something that you think the market wants when you don't even know your market. You have no idea, no business of what goes on in the music industry. So with that, we'll go ahead and move into our second tip. Today's episode is brought to you by the merch shop at thekeytoconsistency.com. I would encourage you to visit our merch shop to see if there's anything that piques your interest. One of the easiest ways to be consistent is to be visually reminded that you are on a mission. You are going to be consistent. So whether you pick up a phone case or you pick up a t-shirt, we have something for you. Again, that is www.thekeytoconsistency.com. And I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. Awesome, guys. So our second topic that we're going to chat through as it relates to entrepreneurship and consistency is going to be something that I am learning with this podcast, and that is consistent customer relationships and branding. For the life of me, did not realize, as simple as this may sound, the importance and it's just really a necessity of branding and establishing a consistent brand, right? And I'm not talking about just your logos. I'm talking about the way in which you communicate with your customers across different platforms. And this may sound so strange to you guys, but people can tell when you are talking to them and they've built a relationship with you versus when you decide you're going to outsource your customer service and they're speaking to someone who may not be in the country that they're in. They're speaking to someone who is a bit more, brash and a bit more harsh than you are. And even if, you don't necessarily handle your own customer relations or your own branding, this is not a shot at outsourcing, because again, if you're going to grow, you cannot do everything. You eventually will have to outsource. But when you get to that point, making sure that you hire people and that you work with people who are not just looking for the next dollar, but they actually care about your brand and what your brand is authentically saying to your consumer base, right? It is so important to make sure that when you're starting out in your business, whatever it is, right, that you start by building those strong customer relationships. I would almost encourage you to not start off and outsource customer service. Like, I think that customer service initially belongs to the person who's starting the business, right? And why do I say that? I say that because unless you're doing something like Amazon, where of course FBA, you go that way, then you want to go that way. But you have to realize that when you do that, you are giving away a portion of your business, and that person that you're outsourcing to may not necessarily know how to communicate with your audience. They may not necessarily, resolve things in an effective manner that may honestly end up hurting your brand, because especially nowadays we live in, cancel culture. We live in an environment where things can go left really quick. People can troll you on your social media. They'll jump from TikTok to Twitter to Instagram to YouTube, leaving negative comments everywhere, right? And so I think that it's important when you are just starting off in your business that you focus on building those strong customer relationships. And there's no better way to do that than for you to be, the face of your business, for you to be the person that's directly solving those customer concerns. And even as a little tip, if you find that, people are reaching out to you about the same things over and over and over again, you may want to even build a template for how to respond. So even when you do end up having to outsource, you can at least give them a shell of a template to say, this is how we greet our customers. We don't say hello first name. We say, greetings, or how are you, or however you greet your customers, right? Like, you want to make sure that as a brand, as you're building your customer relationships, that you not only are consistent in how you're communicating with them, but that you also show yourself, show that your brand actually cares about their experience, right? I cannot tell you, I'm sure we all can sit here and just think through how many times we've interacted with businesses and things didn't necessarily work the way we were expecting them to work. And then now all of a sudden, when we see that brand, whether we see them in a YouTube ad or we, maybe drive by their business, now you have a bad taste in your mouth. And every time you see them or you think about that brand or you talk about that brand, there's a consistently negative tone whenever you mention them. And that is what we want to avoid as we begin to start our businesses. The other thing that I think we should think through as we're, talking about customer relationships and branding is to really strive to knock it out of the park. When someone comes to you with a problem, you want to provide a solution to them. I cannot tell you how many times people have brought problems to me, but do not bring solutions at all. And this is not in an entrepreneurial sense. This is, this is in your personal life. This is if you work a 9 to 5. This is in every area of your life. Just think about for a moment people who bring you problems. You don't remember them as much as people who brought you a problem, but also said, hey, this is a possible solution, right? And so if we flip that and we're talking about your customer interaction, your customer is just bringing you a problem. They are not responsible for and do not need to bring you possible solutions. That is where you come in. That is when your creativity and your willingness and your want to knock it out of the park has to come into play. You have to want to knock it out of the park for them. And what does that look like? If they bring you a problem, whether you can't solve it or you can't solve it the way they want it to be solved, you offer them some solutions. You offer them some workarounds. Why? Because being customer obsessed is literally something that can develop into your culture. You can literally, when you're with someone who is not customer obsessed, they may be able to fake it for a while, but if you hire someone on your team, ultimately you will find if they truly are or are not customer obsessed by the way they consistently interact with your customers. And customer obsession, especially in those early phases, maybe you are, a small to mid-sized company, you're coming up on, $100,000 a year or $50,000 a month, or wherever you may be in your journey. When you begin to hire on people, it is very obvious when you've made a hiring mistake, because people will not be able to be that person they were in that interview for much longer. Who they are, and if they do not have a customer obsessed attitude, that will certainly show. So I would encourage you, while you are starting out, if you are just starting out and you don't have, those several $1,000 months, trust me, one, they are coming, but two, take these tips to heart, that building a brand, having strong customer relationships, and being customer obsessed is very, very important. I would also encourage you to make sure that outside of, your customer brand and the way that we strive to meet customer expectations, what is the end goal of this? Why are we trying to do all of this? That is a fantastic question. The end game is to build consistent trust with our customer and loyalty, right? I cannot tell you how many online boutiques are online nowadays. As a woman, I can tell you, if you do a quick Google search of an online clothing boutique, anyone can find, a clothing brand that they trust in China to be able to ship things to a warehouse in America, and then kind of, have a Shopify store and, ship their stuff. Like, it's not a complicated process to get a fashion boutique up and running. But what makes the difference? It is the loyalty. It is the customer obsession. It is the way that they are maintaining those strong relationships. And how do you get there? You get there with time. You get there with doing these things over and over and over again on a consistent basis. And it's not going to be easy, right? Time is the one thing that you can't rush. Well, many things. It's one of many things, I should say, that you cannot rush. But as you continue to build up your reputation in your specific niche, people will begin to build a certain level of trust with your brand when they see that your brand is consistent, when they see that you consistently solve problems with a level of efficiency, and you're showing that you are truly obsessed and you truly care about the problem that they're having. And then the last thing that I'd like to address with you guys today is going to be, of course, some of those challenges that will come from entrepreneurship. Oh my goodness. We've touched on a couple of them already at a high level when we think about hiring, right? And we think about making sure that you hire the right people on your team. But if we just start back with the basics, making sure that you even have a legitimate business, right? That's first and foremost. Making sure you have your EIN, making sure that you have your LLC, right? Making sure that the basics of your business are covered. Making sure that just because you are starting out and just because you have a new business, hear me and hear me clearly. It is important that you pay yourself first. Do not fall into the trap of always, taking from your personal account and, giving it to the business, which is totally fine. But that is what we call a business loan. That is not, oh, well, it's my business. I can give from my personal to my business. You absolutely can. But number one, that business needs to begin to carry its own weight after a while, right? And how does a business do that? By you investing in your business. And so do not fall into the trap when you're just starting out. Of course, when you're new, you're going to have to get the money from somewhere, right? It's likely going to come from, if you work a 9 to 5, or however you get your income currently is going to come from that. But we're not trying to stay there. We are also, when we think about businesses and, just some challenges to overcome, we also have to be mindful about how we share our success. We live in a world where, while everybody we'd like everybody to be on our side. Everyone is not truly on our side. And you don't want to get in a situation where you are oversharing information. We don't want to be in a situation where we are oversharing information. And then because we are oversharing, outside people who are not in our business, who don't understand our niche, are now able to leverage that information in a way that causes us harm. And so we want to make sure that we are cognizant of the things that we are sharing, even great things like, man, I just had my first 100K month. Again, not personal experience, but just saying out loud, although again, it will happen. Those types of things, right? We want to make sure that we are cognizant of what we are sharing and how we are sharing those things. And then the inverse of that, we want to make sure that we aren't undersharing. We do want to make sure that we have a trusted circle. Maybe it's, other local entrepreneurs who are starting their business as well, and they're trying to get their business up and running. We want to make sure that we also have a supportive group that we can celebrate those small wins with, because that's what's going to keep us going and help us be consistent on this journey to becoming successful entrepreneurs. It is important that when you feel, like you aren't able to accomplish the things you want to, when you may not feel motivated that day, because again, every day is going to bring something different. It's going to bring something new. It is important that you have your support team around you, whether you go to the Bible, whether you have people around you, whether you journal, whether you read, whatever you do to get yourself up in good spirits and get yourself going. That is what you need to focus on when you're feeling those moments of, you're not as motivated as you would need to be or as you would like to be in order to work on your business. Sometimes it's not about motivation. And I say sometimes to be kind, but the truth is it's never about motivation. Especially not on this podcast. And if you're listening to this podcast, you know that consistency has nothing to do with motivation. You do it because it is a part of who you are. It is a consistent part of who you are. And that is why you do it. So hopefully you guys found something from today's episode, whether it was, a challenge, whether you just completely laughed at me for spending $10,000 in an industry that I had no knowledge of, or you decided, I'm actually going to, write out a business plan or think through my actual vision. Hopefully you found some tidbits that you'll be able to leverage on your entrepreneurial journey. And of course, as always, we're going to end today's episode with a verse from the best book in the world. Today's verse comes from Ecclesiastes 9:10. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all of your might. This verse is meant to encourage us as individuals to make sure that we pursue our work and our ventures with passion, dedication, and consistency. Make sure that you pursue your endeavors, especially your entrepreneurial endeavors, with a level of enthusiasm and diligence that they are due, and you will reap a reward in due time.